Welcome to another episode of the Freedom Filled Life. Today we're in Dade County, Georgia. Here I am standing on the Georgia-Alabama line, and we're going to learn about the plantation schools and other historical things that happened in Dade County. So let's take a look and see what we can find. This is the Redding House, part of the Chickamauga Campaign Heritage Trail. The Redding House is a large double-pen log structure with an open breezeway between the pens. There are stone chimneys on either end of the house. The structure is in excellent condition and has been fully restored by the owner. This was a working farm operated by the Redding family during the war. In addition to the house, there would have been stables, cribs, and other outbuildings. While there is no record of camps, there could have been a short-term Confederate camps in the area. This site provides an example of what the women of the Confederacy did during the war. With most of the men away in the army, the females of the county were responsible for holding things together. They managed the farms and, with the assistance of their children and enslaved Africans, if they owned any, they not only produced food for themselves, but also grew a surplus for sale to the army. Some women worked under government contract during the war making uniforms. The state quartermaster office employed male tailors to cut uniforms from patterns. The cut uniforms, thread, buttons, and other accessories were then sent to women for sewing. The women also supported the Confederate cause in numerous other ways. Each community had a Soldiers' Relief Society that was made up of local women and girls. They met to make quilts and knit socks and mittens for the soldiers. They also made uniforms and rolled bandages. These patriotic women welcomed the opportunity to thank men for their military service through gifts and goods provided by local soldiers' relief societies. Women made or collected socks, shirts, pants, and blankets for soldiers. Some groups sent goods to local military units, while others forwarded packages to the front with instructions to distribute them as needed. In addition, they frequently sent packages of food for the military camps. Relief societies also sent reading material, Bibles, and religious pamphlets to the men in the field. Overcrowded camps and unsanitary conditions killed thousands of Georgia Confederate soldiers. In addition, surgeons treated soldiers under conditions that commonly led to deadly infections. More Civil War soldiers died from illness than from battle wounds. The Confederacy established a hospital complex at Ringgold, Georgia. Because of a shortage of male nurses, women stepped in to care for the sick and wounded. Some of the young women of Dade County volunteered for this duty. At first, the women mainly brought food to patients and wrote and read their letters. Gradually, however, women began to take a more active role by assisting surgeons in changing dressings. After the Battle of Chickamauga, some of the less seriously wounded were brought to private homes in Dade County for nursing and convalescence. In this part of Dade County, the Soldiers' Relief Society activities were directed by a young woman named Minerva Redding and her mother. The other women brought the articles they made to the Redding House, and Minerva and her mother delivered them to the Confederate camps. And so, looking past the sign here, this is the actual Redding House. I would walk around to the back, but I'm not even sure I'm supposed to be this close. This is Cole Plantation and Bethlehem Cemetery, part of the historic Dade County. Once again, it's a little bit difficult to read. William Isham Cole was born May 7, 1805. He married Lavina Clark about the same time as the Treaty of New Echota between the U.S. government and the Cherokee Nation that ended all native land claims in the state of Georgia. Cole took advantage of this situation and moved with his new wife to what is now Dade County, Georgia. The Cole family first lived just north of Morganville. In 1850, William Isham Cole bought extensive acreage in Sligo Valley and established one of the finest plantations in the county. The original house was built of logs and consisted of 2 large rooms with a huge limestone fireplace. A later frame addition consisted of 5 more rooms, 2 stone chimneys, and 4 fireplaces. Cole was a prosperous planter at the time of the 1860 federal census, living with his wife and 3 children. With a plantation on Squirreltown Creek, he was one of the best known slave owners in Dade County. He had a deserved reputation for fair treatment of his slaves, and once paid considerably more to keep a young man from being separated from his family. During the late summer of 1863, when it had become apparent that a major federal army was coming toward Dade County, William Cole became concerned about the future of his slaves. He feared that the federal soldiers would force them to leave the plantation or in some way harm them. To avoid this possibility, he decided to send them all to South Alabama for the duration of the war. He placed a mature woman named Adeline, he called her Ad, in charge of the group, giving her $1,000 in gold and telling her to use it if necessary to keep them together and to return to the plantation after the war. The war devastated Cole's plantation and left William I. Cole destitute. He often wondered what had become of his slaves that he had sent south. Then one day, as he was looking down the lane, he saw a band of Negroes coming toward the house. As they drew closer, he could see that Adeline led them. Although they were no longer slaves, all of the faithful blacks had come home. Adeline opened her small bundle of possessions and returned to Cole all of the $1,000 in gold that he had trusted her with during the war. He was able to use the money to rebuild the plantation. As was the custom on most plantations of the day, a cemetery was established on a hillside about a quarter of a mile from the main house. This became the Bethlehem Cemetery. On the upper left side of the cemetery, there are a large number of graves that are only marked by small rectangular stones. Most of these small stones at the Bethlehem Cemetery mark the graves of former slaves who lived and worked on the plantation and their descendants. And then we're standing here actually in front of the Bethlehem Church. And if we look up on the hillside behind the church, we can see the cemetery is still back there. I'm not going to walk up to the cemetery. But we can see the cemetery back here behind the church. This marker is for the Cole Plantation and Academy, part of the Chickamauga Campaign Heritage Trail. William I. Cole was a prosperous 51-year-old farmer at the time of the 1860 federal census, living with his wife and 3 children with a plantation on Squirreltown Creek. He was one of the best-known slave owners in Dade County. Looks like this is exactly the same wording that was on the other one that was just read down by the Bethlehem Church, so I'm not going to go ahead and continue to read the rest of this. This marker is for the O'Neill House, part of the Chickamauga Campaign Heritage Trail. The Zachariah O'Neill House is a rectangular single-pin log structure having corner timbering and constructed with hewn logs. At one end there is a brick chimney. There is some weathering on the north end of the structure, but there is a new roof and overall condition of the house is reasonably good. During the war, this was a working farm, and there would have been, in addition to the house, a barn, cribs, and other farm outbuildings. While there is no record of wartime camps in the area, such features could be present. The fact that this site is located some distance from the railroad was not part of the wartime Trenton, saved it from being burned when General Ewing was in the area. This is one of the few wartime structures still standing in as much of its original form in Dade County, and is the only such structure in the city of Trenton. It was the home to Zechariah O'Neill family. In 1860, Zechariah O'Neill was a prosperous farmer, 56 years old, living with his 46-year-old wife. They had come to the area about 15 years earlier from South Carolina. In the O'Neill household, there was a 21-year-old son who was a carpenter, an 18-year-old son who was a farm laborer, and 4 daughters ages 16, 14, 10, and 7. The two youngest girls attended school in Trenton. The sons, Thomas J. and James A. O'Neill, served as privates in Company E of the 10th Regiment, 3rd Brigade of the Georgia State Troops from mid-1861 to May 1862. They then enlisted as privates in Company F of the 34th Georgia Infantry Regiment of the Confederate Army. This was the company commanded by Captain William E. Brock, and most of the men were from Trenton. Both boys served in the difficult Jackson and Vicksburg campaign. The boys also had 3 cousins who served in the same company. They were all captured by the Federal Army at the surrender of Vicksburg in July 4th, 1863. They were paroled and instructed to return to their units. Thomas and 2 cousins were unable to do so. It is known that some members of the company attempted to visit their homes in Dade County, not knowing that it was under federal occupation. One of these, a known friend of the O'Neill family, found himself cut off from the Confederate positions and went up into Marion County, Tennessee, and hid for the rest of the war. James A. O'Neill rejoined his unit and was captured at Tunnel Hill, Georgia on May 13, 1864. He spent the rest of the war in prison and was released at Camp Morton, Indiana on May 22, 1865. J.W. O'Neill also rejoined his unit and was promoted to second lieutenant. He remained with the Army and was present at the general surrender in Greensboro, North Carolina, April 26, 1865. Now, I'm not sure where the house is, unless it's the structure in front of us. This sign in Trenton, Georgia, is for the Macon Iron Works. It's part of the Chickamauga Campaign Heritage Trail. As you can see, once again, it's kind of a very difficult to read one. During the war, the Macon Iron Works were built near the Trenton Spring. The company was chartered in Macon, Georgia in 1862. Mr. J. Coles and his associates of Macon, James A. Nisbet, wrote on October 3, 1862, have secured a large iron estate and propose organizing a company to do work on a large scale for the Confederate government under a liberal contract. Messrs. Coles, Elam, Alexander, Asa Thompson, and A.M. Lockett, who are interested in this last purchase, are known to the people of Georgia as a whole team in the way of enterprise and capital combined. This facility was in the final stages of construction when the Federal Army of the Cumberland occupied Dade County in September 1863. The presence of slag on the site is evidence that at least some iron had already been made there. On September 4, 1863, General George Thomas reported Negley's division still in camp at Brown Spring. He reports having sent forward a reconnaissance of 2 regiments to scout the country toward Chattanooga and secure some captured stores near Macon Iron Works. The Saturday, September 5th, diary entry by Private Bliss Morse, 105th Ohio Infantry Regiment states, "We marched 5 miles to Trenton, Georgia, and camped near a foundry which is being built." In a letter to his mother, he added, "We laid there, Squirreltown Spring, until noon of the 5th, when marched to this place, Trenton. A railroad runs through to Chattanooga. Our camp is on the rebel farm. The owner was a quartermaster for them, and he had stores of salt, flour, pork, pepper, and whiskey. There is a new furnace here which the owners left as we came up. They hid their horses in the woods, and the boys found them. When General William T. Sherman brought his army of Tennessee to relieve the siege of Chattanooga in November 1863, he sent his brother-in-law, General Hugh Ewing, with a division to invade Dade County as a distraction. General Ewing carried out his instructions well, and on November 20th, 1863, reported to Sherman from Trenton saying, "I am destroying the ironworks and hope by morning to see them all fall to lawless ruin." The same day, Ewing ordered Captain Castle, division engineer, to begin the work of destroying the ironworks. You will proceed at once to destroy the machinery and stack of the ironworks in Lookout Valley. With fire or powder, make the work thorough. Also destroy all tanneries and machinery of mills attached to the ironworks. He issued similar instructions to General Corse, who was camped near the Empire Ironworks south of Trenton. In his final report and his action in Dade County, Ewing stated, "While in the valley, we destroyed the ironworks, breaking into pieces the engines and machinery and leveling the stacks to the ground. In spite of this claim, the structure was much less complete, and remains of both furnaces are still present." I'm not sure if this is where they were standing, but there are some interesting statues here. This is Aspiration 2009. The artistry is Bob Dobrinsky, and here are the structures. In Trenton, Georgia, in front of the Dade County Courthouse, is the Dade County sign. Often called the State of Dade because, as legend has it, the county seceded from the Union ahead of Georgia and only returned to the Union July 4th, 1945. Created December 25th, 1837, and named for Major Francis Langholm Dade, killed by the Indians in Florida, December 1835, the county seat was first named Salem, then changed to Trenton in 1840. Outstanding picturesque mountain scenery accounts for the creation of Cloudland State Park. Rich coal and iron deposits have been worked since antebellum times. This marker is for Trenton, gateway to the Chickamauga and the Campaign for Atlanta, part of the Georgia Civil War Heritage Trails. In early September 1863, a major federal army entered Georgia for the first time since the outbreak of the war. A division of Union, Major General William S. Rosecrans' Army of the Cumberland arrived here on September 4th, the first of at least 25,000 troops to pass through Trenton. They traveled here from northeast Alabama and southern Tennessee, crossing over Sand Mountain with an ultimate goal of capturing Atlanta. While Rosecrans made his headquarters in Trenton, his men spread over all of Dade County, foraging for food and animals. At 3:30 a.m. on the 9th, Rosecrans issued the following order from Trenton to 14th Corps Commander, Major General George H. Thomas. Chattanooga is evacuated by the rebels, and Brigadier General George D. Wagner's brigade will occupy it in the morning. The commanding general desires you to call on him at once to consult in regard to arrangements to the pursuit. Rosecrans' aggressiveness, based on the faulty belief that Confederate General Braxton Bragg's Army of Tennessee was in full retreat, came despite Thomas pleading with him to consolidate the army, then spread over 50 miles. A major portion of the Federal Army proceeded to cross Lookout Mountain about 4 miles southeast from here at Johnson's Crook, continuing toward their bloody defeat at Chickamauga from September 18th through 20th. In November 1863, during the subsequent Confederate siege of the Army of the Cumberland at Chattanooga, Union Major General William T. Sherman brought reinforcements from Mississippi in an ineffective attempt to divert attention away from Chattanooga. Sherman ordered his brother-in-law, Brigadier General Hugh B. Ewing, with an infantry division to the Trenton area. They destroyed some mills and factories, while many local citizens fled to the nearby mountains and hid what belongings they could. The next year and a half was a time of great distress for those citizens remaining in Trenton. subjected to constant raids by Union loyalists from Alabama and Tennessee, some of whom had been forced from their homes in this area by Confederate supporters. Nevertheless, civilian population remained solidly behind the Confederacy. With most men away at war, the women and children, with the help of slaves, kept their farms going. They supported themselves, plus produced a surplus for the war effort. The women met regularly to roll bandages, make uniforms, and prepare food to send to the men at the front. At war's end in 1865, Confederate Colonel James Cooper Nisbet, a local farmer who had organized an 85-man company in the summer of 1861 just south of Trenton at Easley Store, came home. He and other surviving veterans set to work with some of the courageous devotion to duty they had shown on the battlefield, rebuilding their homes and community. Trenton is the county seat of Dade County that Nisbet and others called the Banner Volunteer County of the Confederacy. This title gained prominence because of the number of Dade County men who served in the Confederate Army, which was much greater than the number of voters. This is the Dade County Memorial Park in Trenton, dedicated April 26, 2002. And then they have this display back here, which was dedicated November 9th, 1975 for World War I, World War II, the Korean War, Veteran War, Afghanistan, and Iraq. And then they have this marker over here that's dedicated to the soldiers and families of Dade County, Georgia, for their services to the Confederate States of America, 1861 to 1865. You can see the great number of names there. So I hope you enjoyed what we learned about Dade County. So this was Dade County, Georgia, and we'll see you in the next episode of The Freedom Field Life.